Little low. Now that's me though, that's not this, because I can tell I'm flinching a little. I got a little bit of a flinch lock syndrome going on. Not quite as accurate as I could be. Head on. Mexico at that time did not have any armories for making their own weapons, and they were not a wealthy empire, so they could not afford to buy the best of the best. So the Emperor of Mexico ended up buying everybody else's used junk, basically. One of them being the carbine that had just been decommissioned. So a lot of them went to Mexico, where it is believed that they were used in 1835, 1836, I believe, in the Mexican Revolution. And you know, you'd think that on that open plains land of southern Texas would be really just right for large formations of infantry, right? Yeah, you think those big open plains, you get a lot of soldiers all massed together, forming plenty of room for a formation to maneuver around. But actually, the exact opposite was the case. The country down there around the Rio Grande is so open and so flat that they actually needed mounted units more than infantry. They needed units that could maneuver very quickly, get into position out on that open plains, that open area. And so mounted battle tactics actually was more appropriate than the large infantry formations. And this was actually quite popular among both the Mexican and Texans, who knew a good thing when they saw one and latched onto as many as they could get. More on that in just a bit. Let me shoot her again. A little closer. The thing is, and I'll show you the grouping at the end of the, I love the smell of black powder. If that was a steel target, I would have rang it 3 times. Now it's all over the target, but it still hit it, or would have hit it had it been steel. If that had been a man-sized steel target, it'd have rang 3 times. So both Mexico and Texas used a lot of these in the early 1800s. Then Texas was annexed as a state in 1845, and then it became the Mexican-American War of about, I think, 1846 to 1848. And actually, of course, we don't really know if this particular carbine or even some version of the Eliott Dragoon was actually involved in that, but it's quite likely that it was, because the Mexicans they probably just couldn't afford to buy anything to replace them with. As long as they worked, as long as they were still shooting, they'd go ahead and use them. And the thing about that is, if you remember, in 1846, a man named Captain Sam Walker went to visit a man named Sam Colt about designing a revolver for him. Now, Colt had designed and put out on the market the Patterson, which had not done well financially. And in fact, he had gone bankrupt, gone out of business. But a few of those Pattersons made their way down to the Rio Grande, where the Texans really liked that 5-shot capability, because it just seemed like they were always seriously outnumbered. And they liked that 5-shot capacity compared to the Mexicans' 1-shot on their carbines. So what really Walker was envisioning was a fusion between a carbine, which had plenty of power, and a revolver, which would have had the superior firepower. So when he went to see, I don't know, I'm gonna have to probably gonna need to scour it next time to get that down. When he went to see Sam Colt, one of the requirements was that, yeah, I went down easier than I thought, that it have the same killing power as a carbine. And what they wanted was something that would knock a horse down or knock a man off his horse at 50 to 100 yards. So we don't know for sure, but I like to think the carbine that Captain Walker was referring to was this, the Eliott Dragoon carbine, which, if it is or was, then it would be no coincidence that the Walker revolver was chambered for 30 grains of triple F black powder, which is exactly the same charge that this uses. And that it was reported to be able to kill a horse or knock a man off it at 100 yards, like it was rumored this thing could do. And the thing about that is that might be a tire fabrication. In fact, it even could be the Baker rifle, which is about the same size and could be mistaken for one if you've never seen one before. You could mistake a Baker for this. But I like to think that it was this carbine. And that being the case, I think it's kind of cool that a short-barreled, large caliber, smooth-bore flintlock mobile infantry carbine could have at least been partly responsible for the development of all of modern revolvers. Because remember, at that time, Colt had already gone out of business. He'd already sold off his factory, all of his tooling. He was done with handguns. It wasn't like he just closed the doors up. He sold everything off. And when Captain Walker went to see him, he was making electrical detonators for underwater explosives. So it was the Walker that brought Sam Colt back into the handgun business and gave him enough money to ultimately buy his own tooling and start his factory back up, start experimenting with the Dragoon series, which then in turn led to, I'm going to leave something out here, but I'll get the basic sequence right. The 1849 pocket gun, the 1851 Navy, the 1860 Army, the Peacemaker, the 1862 police pistol, which basically led to all of modern revolvers. So I think it's kind of cool that the Walker could have been designed in direct response to the Eliott carbine down on the Rio Grande. Now, without this carbine, of course, revolvers would still exist, but they'd have a very different history. And the name Sam Colt might have been just relegated to history. Not many people might know it. Could be Remington or a Winchester that dominated firearms, handguns, and such throughout the 19th century instead of Colt. So, one more. Wait, high again. That one knocked me back a couple inches. So, yeah, it's fun. That's the history of the Eliott Dragoon carbine. Now, here's the thing. If you go on YouTube and you do a search on the Eliott Dragoon carbine, you'll find one video maybe, including this one. You'll find several on the Dragoon pistol, and you'll find different carbines from different eras, mostly from the early to mid 1800s, but you're not going to find anything like this. And I guess my question is why? First of all, it's just a hoot to shoot. It is fun. I love the small size, the lightweight. I mean, look at where the balance on that is. I mean, look at that. Is that not perfect for on a horseback, all right, that is just outstanding. It's easy to carry. It is unique, especially with this side-mounted sling, which I've shown you. If I was going to snaz this up as, say, a fowling piece or a trade gun, I would take this off. It really doesn't serve much purpose. And then I'd put a standard sling on it. So, where did I get it? It was made in India and imported by Veteran Arms in Georgia. Now, there are two main companies importing these Indian-made period replicas, Veteran Arms, and then there's one in Canada called Military Heritage. And before you leave a comment stating how much less expensive the Military Heritage versions are, yeah, to get it in a box at your front door, about a couple $100 less, maybe, from Military Heritage for the same gun than from Veteran Arms. So why would anybody buy it from Veteran Arms? Well, these things are imported as non-firing replicas. That means they don't shoot. When these things get off the boat, they can't be fired. The main reason is the Indians don't drill the vent in the barrel. So what Military Heritage does is they just send one to you and hey, it's yours, you deal with it. What you're buying from them is a non-firing display replica. That's what you're getting. That's what Military Heritage is selling. Then you get to drill the vent hole. You get to harden the hammer, which is this civilians mistakenly call the frizzen. This is not a frizzen. This is a hammer. This is a cock. The cock, the jaws, the flint, the hammer. This is not a flash pan. This is a priming pan. And the hole in the barrel is the vent, not the flash hole. Just being clear about that. But yeah, you get to harden that yourself. They come in unhardened or barely hardened. So you get to do that yourself from Military Heritage. And if it has any problems with the lock mechanism, you get to take it apart, tune it up and clean it and make it work yourself. So if you get one in the mail that doesn't work right, you get to take care of it. And yeah, they're cutting a couple of $100 off the price for that. Veteran Arms, at least the three that I have purchased so far, including this one, they shoot right out of the box. They drill the vent hole, they proof it, they test it and make sure that it works. And I don't know this for a fact, but I think they take the lock apart and they polish and clean it up. Now I'm going to find out in the next video when I take this inside and clean it up. But I also got to tell you that I'm shooting my powder and look at that. That is actually very clean. It's got a little gunk on it, but not much. Not as much as some commercial powders would have. So yeah, in the next video, I'm going to get this inside and I'm going to strip it down, take it apart. The lock works perfect. I might clean and polish the pieces up a little. I also might blue the steel on it. I haven't decided on that yet. I might do some rework on the stock. Might do some carving and you know, some dress it, snazz it up a little. If I do that, it will be less historically accurate than it is now. Oh, which by the way, we talk about that a little bit. I would say this is about 80 to 90% historically accurate. When you look at photographs of originals, at first you'd think, oh man, those things are almost identical. Then you start seeing some minor differences in it. I'm not going to go into all that now, but I might go into that in the next couple of videos as I take it apart, clean it, and put it up. But it is not a 100% authentic reproduction, which really none of them are. So, okay, one more thing, the stampings. I don't know if I can show you here, but you see the tower back here on the back of the butt plate, tower, and then here you've got a crown. That's for the British Crown, the GR. That's actually the only stampings visible on this replica. Doesn't say black powder only, doesn't say made in India, doesn't have Veteran Arms stamped on it, nothing. Now, in fact, the originals would have had a couple of extra marks added to it that this one doesn't have. And that's not a problem because you can always put more stampings on it. You can't take bullshit stampings off though. And this has no bullshit stampings on it. It has original stampings minus one or two, which you can very easily add. Um, yeah, overall, the fit, form, and finish, I believe, is very accurate for a military issue weapon of the period, because you've got to remember that there are two types of firearms in the American colonies. You had those just really beautiful works of art, the Daniel Boone guns and stuff made in these little mom and pop shops in Boston, New York, and then out in the frontier, where every piece they cranked out was unique, it was beautiful, it was perfect. It was just the kind of gun that anyone could be proud to walk down the street with, to show off to people, to pass on to their children and grandchildren. And then there was everybody else who couldn't afford those guns. And they were carrying English trade guns, French trade guns, fusil de chasse. And the English trade gun, especially when you read about it, you'll read phrases like, some of them were quite crude. What does that mean? Some of them were quite crude. Yeah. And then you want to configure that the English trade guns, I'm getting nothing but shadows here on my face, and I hate that when I see that in other videos. That's better. Well, it's not really. Let me move this out here. I really hate watching a video and some guy's talking to me and all I can see is a shadow and a big fat bushy beard and a pair of sunglasses. That's better. The English trade guns especially, and then the military issue guns, were made in factories. They were mass produced utilizing semi-skilled or even unskilled labor under contract by the lowest bidder. Okay? As long as it worked, as long as they pulled the trigger, it shot. They didn't really give a shit what it looked like. They didn't need to. It was under contract. Now, contracts would have different requirements. Some would specify specific furniture. Like this one, for example, has one ram guide. It might specify 2 or 3 ram guides. It would specify iron or brass, reset for a bayonet or not, that kind of stuff. And from a distance, they look great. I mean, from a distance, this thing looks great. If I'm a Dragoon and I'm carrying this, right, and I'm on horseback and I'm running down the street, because among other things, the Dragoons also served as the King and Queen's Royal Guard. So they're in their little coach headed down the street. I'm on my horse beside them. You know, that can look pretty cool hanging there while I'm riding along. And you don't see the wood's a little crooked. You don't see that it's teak, not walnut. You don't see the gaps and the cracks. You don't see you see that? You don't see the smudges on the end of the barrel where bayonets have been attached and detached a lot. And in a typical 18th, early 19th century battle, a soldier's lifespan was about 10 minutes. Did he really have time to be concerned about there's a little bit of a gap between the stock and the barrel? I think he's concerned more about, will this thing shoot when I pull the trigger? Okay. So they were mass produced, and I think even though these were mass produced for the military, some of them were probably, well, all of them were probably very rough and ready. And some of them were probably quite crude, and maybe a few even had to be sent back because they probably didn't even work, or they might have had gunsmiths on site at the fort who could rework them and get them to work. So that being the case, then what some people are nitpicking away on the rough and ready finish on this musket is actually historically correct. It's how this would have looked. If we went back to the colonies in the late 18th century and just picked up a typical Dragoon carbine, it probably would have looked a lot like this. A few minor differences, but as far as fit, form, and finish goes, this is what you probably would have got. Now, for me personally, I love this short size. I mean, look at that balance. I've already showed it once, but look at that. That is just beautiful. One more thing. Let's go look at the grouping. if you want to call it that. I'm not sure how accurate this would be in the hands of a good marksman. I'm going to need to find out as soon as I can find a good marksman. Uh, anyway, two really close here, high, and two down here. Now, the thing is, left and right, they're good. It's just elevation. That's what I got to work on. And the fact is, there's no rear sight. I'm trying to use this screw here as a rear sight. Line the front side up with the slot in that screw. The front side is also a bayonet lug. So it's look how wide that is. It's not like a blade front side. There's not much of a side at all on it. So elevation is where it has a problem, but left and right, it's perfect. And for the 18th century, all four of these are kill shots. You're not surviving any of those. Well, no, gut shot, you're gone. You might hang around for a week or two and you're gone. Up here, we're looking at, let's see, where are we looking at? You're looking at here, you're dead. You're talking heart, lungs, spine, because those are lined up pretty good, pretty close together. So yeah, these are kill shots. Just need to bring the elevation in a little tighter. Not bad at all. The 1773 Eliott Dragoon Carbine, made in India, imported by Veteran Arms. Let's go inside, take this thing apart for cleaning, take the barrel off, look at see if there's any stampings underneath it, see how the internal workings on the lock are, and maybe get some ideas for snazzing this thing up a little bit, making it a little more civilianified, I guess. So anyway, thanks for watching on this video, and I hope to see you next time. See, they're not far off. It's just I got two really high if they'd been down here, and then these two if they'd been up here. It's the elevation. Okay, it's not bad for 30 yards. Well, it's not bad for me for 30 yards. I'm sure Daniel Boone could have done better. Of course, his gun was rifled and had a longer barrel. And he hadn't had cataract surgery a couple years earlier. At least I don't think he had.